Hey, hi, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Season 1 finale of Pencils Down, a podcast about education, policy, policy, education, and everything in between. My name is Sam Zuckert, and this is Episode 5, Kotha at Schools. Since this is our last episode of the season, I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who supported us here at the University of Chicago Public Policy Podcast, and an extra special thank you to everyone out there for listening to our inaugural season. Now let's get on to the good stuff. Here at Pencils Down, our syllabus contains 3 sections: Study Hall, the Chicago Policy Review, and School Days. In Study Hall, we will talk with someone who has had interesting experience or insight into current education and policy issues. And our guest for today is Umama Zillur, the founder and director of Kotha, a feminist, youth-led organization based in Dhaka, Bangladesh, that tackles the root causes of gender-based violence. They aim to mobilize young people to change societal mindsets and dismantle the culture of gender-based violence in Bangladesh. And we are extraordinarily excited to have Umama with us today to talk about Kotha at Schools, one of Kotha's programs. Kotha at Schools aims to begin a cultural shift in high schools by fostering healthy conversations, encouraging respect amongst peers, while equipping students with crucial life skills. Umama, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
When did you decide to start Kotha, and what was your initial goals for the organization?
I get that question a lot, and I never have a very good answer for it. I feel like people will be like, I woke up and I realized that, and that just has never been my answer. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I think just navigating life as a young woman or a young girl in any part of the world, but especially in Dhaka, was just like daily confrontation with just a whole bunch of different types of discrimination. And that was just coming from like all areas, like whether that's school, at home, like whatever medium consuming. So it's just something that I kind of like grew up with, like always challenging in whatever space I was in my own way, like as you do as a 10-year-old and then a 15-year-old, whatever. And then I think like when I was graduating high school was really when I was really analyzing everything that was happening to me, around me, to people like me, and then connecting the dots. So I went into college. I went to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts,
Absolutely.
Which is, yeah.
Love a good Massachusetts college.
Yeah. And I went into college kind of having those thoughts just kind of always swirling in my head. It was sophomore year of college. These kind of like these questions, this rage was there always. Mm-hmm. And it was sophomore year of college when I kind of like put that idea down on paper. I don't like talking about this much, but the official origin was because I was applying to the Clinton Global Initiative, which is like social impact conference where you kind of propose initiatives, ideas, and then you get chosen to like pitch it at the conference, whatever. So I didn't get much out of that conference other than the fact that it pushed me to like jot down some things on paper. And when Kotha was like first, when I put it down on paper, it was like an awareness program because it was 2016. At that point, that this issue was still kind of like, people need to talk about the fact that this is even a problem at the first place. So awareness was what I had started with, but it always had a larger goal of a real radical shift in society about how we think about gender discrimination and gender-based violence and the culture around that violence. So that broader vision and dream and goal was always there, but it started off with an awareness program on paper, and then kind of went
built from there.
Yeah, so now it kind of like awareness just did not seem good enough. So we have like moved more towards education, which is not just, hey, this is an issue, but like, we need skills and tools and knowledge to tackle this issue. But that's kind of how it was. That's the inception.
And so what is some of the work that Kotha does at schools?
Yeah. So so the very first pilot program was with a school. Our pilot program was a version of a sex ed program that was touching on gender norms, consent, peer relationships and conflict and resolution within those relationships, bullying and harassment, very specific to like high school students. So when I started, it was just me, and I was doing the curriculum. I was traveling to the school, teaching, and then I was like just doing all of that. I had some great friends that helped me. Shout out to them. I had just like 20 12th graders, which we started with. And now that has kind of expanded into Bangladesh's first fully youth-led comprehensive sex ed program. Till date, we've had around 600 students that has gone through that program.
Oh, excellent.
We officially call it Kotha at school. We love good branding. And it's a 3-month program. We have a 6-topic curriculum that's in-house built, and we have peer-led sessions where we partner with schools long-term, and we kind of deliver these sessions.
What was the state of sex education in schools in Bangladesh, like before you started, and what is it like now?
So when I had first started, 2016 was pilot project. I was still a sophomore. I went back, and I really beat myself up for not being able to like juggle a full organization and being a college student. And so junior year and senior year went by. It took a break. I was still doing some background work on it. And then 2018, after graduating, I moved back to Bangladesh and started working on this kind of full time. Even then, when I was going to schools, I did not and could not say that, hey, I'm pitching a comprehensive sex ed to you. I had to be like, hey, do you want you want your students introduced to a new educational program on gender discrimination, equality.
An empowering topic.
Yeah. So like all the fluff words that I could think of that did not directly touch on the word sex ed. Because I would not have been able to get through the doors if I did. But Bangladesh has for a while now, since 2017, on paper, like our official policy documents, do have very concrete recommendations for incorporating comprehensive sex ed into our curriculum and into our national curriculum. So if you look at like the policy, like on paper, what we have, we had a lot, but in it, we actually did not see that getting like implemented. We had a few. United Nations Population Fund had kind of started a pilot program with some schools in the country, but even then it wasn't full-fledged comprehensive sex ed. Versus now, right before I was coming to Harris, we had schools reaching out to us saying, hey, we want to incorporate sex ed into our curriculum. Can we have a meeting with you? So like this is such a huge issue, but even within like just me and like this small example of me with Kotha and this issue, like I've seen like ridiculous change in terms of societal perception, acceptance of this topic. In fact, a couple of months ago, we had our education minister publicly declare that sex ed would be incorporated into all national curriculum, middle school through high school.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So how have students reacted to your program?
That is my favorite part. And like, as kind of Kotha's work picked up and the organization grew, I had to kind of divert my energy in a lot of different directions, but I still always found an excuse to make sure I was in the classroom. Students loved it. One of the big things that we wanted to make sure that we did was like our goal was always to build solidarity with students. Like we are not going in as an NGO from the outside, like talking to admins. Like our ins were always with like students, our connections with students was our strong suit. And one cool thing about Kotha is our sessions are led by peer educators and not traditional teachers. So traditional teachers, in like the South Asian context, the relationship that they have with students is very formal, very distant, and like you will not want to talk to your math teacher about consent.
Right.
Yeah, like, or, forget about like putting on a condom or any of that. Like even just gender norms, that's not something that you would be able to have a conversation about. So we have like university students or like really young professionals who are going into the classrooms who the students can see as like older siblings who are here to, talk to us about things that no one would ever like think to talk to us about. So from the very beginning, there was like students were so enthusiastic, and all of our class like sessions are super interactive. We use like role play, we use a lot of like different educational tools, and they just get super into it. And like they come out and they ask such good questions, and we have them produce a lot of content too as part of the class activities. And I've just seen like some amazing stuff come from there. One of my favorites is one of the last programs that I was able to do. Like we went way over time and they had like a next class coming up, but they just decided to collectively bunk it. And we just like stayed for an extra 40 minutes. Kids are staying back to talk to me about consent, and we're just all having a great time. So
yes, I mean, because young people, they kind of, this is something they don't always have the vocabulary or the opportunity or someone to speak with about this. So it sounds like a very empowering thing you're providing with them.
Yeah, and there's so much shame attached to all of these things, right? Like even just something that's just so normal and natural is like liking another person, and like no one. Like there isn't any part of society where they can talk about that, or that issue has been brought up where shame hasn't been attached to that. So for them to see people going into classroom, casually talking about them, making them feel seen and heard, and not being judged like that. And I always say like Kotha was something I did because that's what I needed growing up. And I think that like from what we've heard from the students, they really feel like that's something that they really appreciate. So that's been really cool.
And now, so a lot of your work is based on trying to end gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination. So have you noticed, is there a different way in which the young women and the young men interact with your program in the schools?
That's an interesting question. We never have like segregated sessions, like everything, like even if it's like menstrual health, we will have boys sitting in on that class and taking part in those discussions. It's been really good to see just like open-mindedness from like both ends to like engage in discussions. Like I will say like from young girls, you will have like certain experiential like knowledge sharing more than boys sometimes that you will see. But I think overall when you were like, a lot of what we're trying to do is make them raise questions about what they're seeing around themselves and also in themselves. So I think that question raising I've seen kind of across the board similarly from both sides.
That's great. And so now what are some of the challenges you found with working with students at these schools?
A big challenge is getting through the door. So admin, school boards, making them realize that there should be demand for a program like this. But the biggest challenge is parents. And I know that's a huge issue in the US as well. If you type in comprehensive sex ed, if you Google that, like the top hits in US will be like parents protesting.
They're screaming at the school board members.
Yeah, so that is, and like I was like shocked that like middle class parents even had this like political consciousness, because like even in Bangladesh, there was a push to kind of incorporate a lot of this content a couple of years ago, and parents held sit-ins at the education minister's office because they didn't want this there. Like all of a sudden they're just like, political change makers when they really don't need to be. So parents, I think, are like one of our biggest obstacles. But one good thing about going through schools, and since we're still kind of at an experiential stage, I would say, parents haven't been as directly involved, but that's still the biggest pushback. And a lot of the pushback that comes from school admin and teachers is in fear of parents too. So
is a lot of the pushback because they disagree with the material, or they just don't want this kind of material covered in schools?
It's interesting because one argument is that they don't want these vulgar topics to be, their children to be exposed to these topics. Simultaneously, another argument is that, hey, we have internet now. Whatever they need to know, they can know from, they have access to all this information. So like, you don't need to come in and have like open conversation about things that need to be said behind closed doors and in hushed tones. So I'm just like,